Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is going to be another Doomsday video. I had quite a good weekend with the deck. I top 4'd, and you can see that run in the previous video, and then I top 8'd the day after, and that's going to be the video today. So I played the same 75, except I added a snuff out over the tabernacle that I figured that I didn't need. And I think moving forward, I'll get rid of the Vampiric Tutor and play a third Steel Sabotage with the surge of shops. So yeah, that's my suggested list going into this weekend. -1 Vampiric Tutor, +1 Steel Sabotage compared to this list. But without further ado, let's get down to the first game. And we have a sweet one here. This is game 3 of round 1. And I play against the deck that I haven't seen in a long time. It's a Lurrus Hate Bear deck, which is extremely scary to play against. That deck has a bunch of Hate Bears like Thalia, Leonin Arbiter. Can't really think of, maybe like Spirit of the Labyrinth, stuff like that. So super scary cards. I'm on a mulligan here. I have a hand with some decent tools. I imagine I bin the Oracle. Let's see. Oracle hits the bottom of the deck. And I pass the turn here. The reason I pass the turn here and don't cast the Ponder is might as well go get Ancestral Recall right away, right? And then use Ponder as force fodder in case my opponent plays something I don't want to see. And unfortunately, with this kind of hand, Deafening Silence is something I don't want to see, so I have to force that. Get kind of low here, Mystical Ancestral, and see where that takes me. Mystical Ancestral got me to Ponder Doomsday. Land. Not bad, not bad. Let's see if we can hit a Dark Ritual off this Ponder, or I guess Black Lotus. I'm looking for stuff to, just get the Doomsday casted, and then kind of see what happens. There's a Dig Through Time and a Snuff Out. So the cool thing about Snuff Out here is I have a mana up, so even if my opponent goes Thalia, I can Snuff Out at end of turn. If my opponent does not play a Hate Bear, I think I'm generally just happy that I can go Dig Through Time or Doomsday the next turn. Worth noting is I'm kind of weak to Wasteland with how I played here, so let's hope we don't get wasted. Okay, here's a Thalia. Not a big deal. I can Snuff Out it before my turn, use my mana. Now I have the choice between casting Doomsday straight up or casting Dig Through Time. The reason why I cast Dig Through Time is I'm so likely to hit like Dark Ritual or Lotus and something else. So I'm going to do that. And the Dig Through Time is not useful post-Doomsday, so a few things relevant here. Okay, here's a Black Lotus. Let's see which card I take alongside with it. I take a Preordain, okay. So that Preordain kind of helps me, let's say I get Wastelanded or whatever, then that Preordain helps me dig into the deck post-Doomsday. It's not castable now, which is a bit sad. And once more, if my opponent plays some kind of, Spirit or something, I can push it end of turn and then go to work. It ends up being not a super relevant play here. My opponent goes Relic Warder, but here's Deafening Silence. And the cool thing about this is, for me at least, each player can cast more than one non-creature. So my pile took that into consideration. If I remember correctly, I Time Walk into the win here because Thassa's Oracle is a creature, and I can just cast Preordain into land. Yeah. So here I just cast Preordain into this island, I cast Thassa's Oracle, and that's all she wrote. We're off to a 1-0 start. So yeah, pretty nice start. That deck is scary, but it is worth noticing that Thalia can be played around or killed. Deafening Silence can be countered or played around. So my opponent kind of needs a lot of stuff. But just a simple Wasteland here would have gone a long way, and I would have had trouble this game. So definitely a scary matchup, but yeah, we prevail. All right. This is round 2. I'm playing against 4-color Lurrus. My opponent showed both Lavinia and Wrenn and 6 alongside the normal blue stuff. Let's take a look at a sideboard. This time I forgot in the first round. I brought in removal in the first round, and I don't have the flusters and negations, so pretty clear cut, I would say. So for this matchup, I don't like the top pick tutors, don't like negation. That's like the classic way to board against fair blue. I do like the removal spells that actually kill Lavinia. This is uncastable against Lavinia, so Snuff Out is Not the best when it comes to that, but it is very good at, killing stuff for free out of the initiative deck, so I like that card in general. And then I trim a single Street Wraith. Let's have a look at our opening here. I mean, not much to report. We have a couple of lands, some cantrips, Force of Will, and our combo card, so let's just see how this game progresses. Mox, Tundra, Manamorphose. Yeah, I remember this. My opponent went Manamorphose Lavinia in the first game. Ren at 6. I decide to not care about that card and simply try and overpower the Wasteland if the Wasteland's even there. I don't care about my opponent holding up Mox Jet either. That's mainly a reason to play out so my opponent can pay for days. In case I go like Ritual, Doomsday, opponent forces, I have a days. But yeah, that card does not represent anything as far as I'm aware. I draw a third land here, which is something I need like inevitably. And I do end up hedging for the Wasteland here with Island Preordain. I see Dark Ritual, Flusterstorm. I obviously like both of those cards. That will make for a very powerful turn 2 over here. My opponent just puts Lurrus in hand after fetching proactively and taking land back. Here I can fetch C, Ritual, Doomsday with a ton of backup, and I even have the Gush. My opponent hasn't interacted yet, so I'm just gonna assume I'm golden here, and I can Gush into Lotus Ancestral. 3 cards in library. I cast Ancestral Recall, and I have Oracle with double backup. My opponent probably kept a pretty sketchy hand here, but I think it's tempting between having, turn 1 Ren and 6 on the play. If I'm on some Underground Sea, Ponder, Underground Sea, Preordain type draw, then Wasteland becomes insane. And there's also the kind of bluff factor of me, if I just have Ritual Doomsday, I might want to wait for a better spot, so that way my opponent gains a little bit of time. So this is just to say I don't think it's a straight-up mistake to not have a hand with a counterspell against Doomsday. Also, if you have to mulligan too much, it's just you just lose so much equity in the games where I just go Preordain, Treasure Cruise, Flusterstorm. So yeah, Doomsday is tough to play against because sometimes you get punished for not having a counter. Sometimes you get buried in, Delve spells and Flusterstorms when you have a bunch of forces. So yeah, tough run out here for the opponent, but that makes us 2-0. All right, round 3 is a Doomsday Mirror. I boarded out my top deck tutors and 3 Street Wraiths for 4 disruption pieces, 3 free counters, and the duress. My opponent took a single mulligan, and I have a pretty sick hand here. I have Mental Misstep if my opponent goes broken turn 1. I have Ancestral Recall I can try and craft the game plan around. And also Treasure Cruise, so yeah, super strong. Let's see. My opponent just goes land go here. And I draw Ponder, so I decide to play Ponder here for a couple of reasons. I don't want to get flustered on my Ancestral. I actually like most of my hand, so I'm basically just trying to find like a fluster to find a better spot for the Ancestral. But this is also insane, right? I get to put Force Negation on top and have Doomsday right under it. Like super filthy stuff. I believe my opponent fetches a Surveil land here, which doesn't tell me a whole lot about their hand. Here's Preordain, I don't care about that. It is tempting, like, it's actually a good play by the opponent. Let's say they already had the second land, they can kind of see if they can get Misstep out of me, but right now Misstep is insane against my hand. It always counters Dark Ritual, etc., etc. Alright, so what's my logic here? I can go Ancestral Recall, or I can go Ritual Doomsday. So what I decide to do here is go Ritual Doomsday. I assume I get flustered, and then I'm just ready to play with 2 draw 3s post getting countered. So while this is not a good play for me per se, I still think it's a good way to play a hand like this where you can just, oh, sure, I just have 2 draw 3s to get back into this game. So I decide to not fire it off now because of opposing Force Negation. I can't protect it in that case. So I decided it's better to cast on my opponent's upkeep, and that the second fluster would punish me here, which is a fair point. Luckily for me, my opponent had Force of Will. I'm happy to trade pitch cards at this point. It's me with Ancestral on the stack after all. And I draw into some not very strong cards here. My opponent plays Ponder, and now I think it's time to fire the Misstep to kind of keep my opponent from drawing stuff like, third land, Doomsday, Treasure Cruise, Stick Through Time, like action basically. They do find a Lotus though, pass the turn with 1 mana. 1 card in hand rather. So yeah, I'm looking pretty good in this game. The only way I can lose this game is like if the game goes on for let's say 4 or 5 turns and my opponent's draws have been just better than mine, then they can kind of eat in on the advantage, so to speak. I draw Dark Ritual, which is another bad card. I resolve Treasure Cruise, which is amazing. Now I go Ritual Doomsday, and since the coast was clear for Treasure Cruise, the only card my opponent could have here is the second Fluster to stop this Doomsday. That is exactly what my opponent has. So this game goes on. I can't pay 4 mana here. I hang on to Force Probe because I like my Demonic Consultation and Demonic Tutor to be game over with the Oracle. But I'm not scared to pitch the Oracle later. Let's say my opponent goes, I don't know, Treasure Cruise. Then I just pitch the Oracle and play on with the Probe. But in general, I'm not in a hurry here as long as I have protection. Let's see. Sometimes these replays are terribly slow. But yeah. Let's see what we draw here. I draw Sapphire, which isn't the best. And decide to pass the turn with 5 mana up. Same logic. If my opponent goes Treasure Cruise, it's just better, you know, hardcast Force. And then still have the Oracle and the Probe. Mindset is, I'm not in a hurry as long as I have protection. I believe this is where I make a small misstep. So I draw land, which is terrible draw. So now I pay mana for my Probe, which is... That is a mistake, or it's a mistake that I don't play the land. Anyway, I don't have Force up, so let's say my opponent has, I guess what would the card be? Ancestral Recall or Dig Through Time in response here, I get punished, which is very, very bad. So my opponent does not respond, and funnily enough, my opponent has Dig Through Time, so I would have had to pitch my Oracle, which is not the end of the world, but still just bad sequencing from my part. If I wasn't so lucky that my opponent just said, okay. Also, my opponent has Sheldred in hand, which I have covered right now. Force Negation is a great draw. Like, when you can hardcast it, it's just amazing. Because of all the draw threes, I have way more lands than my opponent. I don't have more cards in hand, but I have more lands. I fetch a single time before my turn here. I keep an uncracked fetch for Ponder. Dark Ritual is most likely a terrible draw. If I remember correctly, I actually find a pretty good spot for it this game. Let's see. My opponent will now cast a Dig Through Time, I believe. It's like the logic of it doesn't get better from here, right? So I just force to negate it. So now as you can see, my mana is pretty cool here that I can Dark Ritual, Hardcast, Force of Will, which is better than pitching the Oracle. My opponent probes. My opponent forces the issue here with Ritual Sheldred. There's also a chance my opponent did not think about it, but I will give them credit and say they forced the issue here. Ritual, Hardcast, Force. And all of a sudden, my opponent has 1 card and I have an Oracle. Preordain is a good draw, and Fluster is a good find. So we're kind of back to the... As long as I have protection, I'm not worried, and I'm favored because of the mana I have available. That means, like, Force of Will is a better draw. When I do draw Doomsday, I can pay for Fluster, etc. Like, it's an advantage having all of those lands, but it's not unbeatable for the opponent to overcome it. Let's see what we find here on our draw step. This is, by the way, probably the best game of the tournament, to be honest. Super, super cool game. I draw Mindbreak Trap. It's like the same thing. Hardcast Mindbreak Trap is just, yeah, can't really lose now, right? But then again, the same logic is, if the game goes on for 4 turns, I draw 3 lands and a spell, my opponent draws 3 spells and a land, all of a sudden we have a game, right? My opponent passes once more, 3 cards in hand. Let's see what I draw. I draw another Dark Ritual. That ritual is less likely to be good, but who knows? No play from the opponent. Here's a duress that I decide to fire off Mindbreak Trap on. I think that's just better. Like, they can take the Mindbreak Trap if I don't. Info about the rest of my hand, etc. So funnily enough, here's another situation where Dark Ritual is just super serviceable. It ends up trading with a Flusterstorm. I can make 3 black, pay for 3 Flusters. That's better than casting my own Fluster. It's better than, getting duressed on the Fluster. And there I draw Necro. My opponent had, the last 2 cards were Force Pitch, but I have a Fluster to force it through. And at this point, the opponent can't do much. They're empty-handed. I can draw Full Grip. Put some Necro activations on the stack. Move to cleanup, or end step rather. Discard Street Wraith, discard Fetch. And I can even cast a Dictate Time on my opponent's upkeep that goes and gets Force Will and Consultation. My opponent has 1 card in hand, so that 1 card in hand is not going to help my opponent. I just untap, and I even have a duress. It's quite laughable. But it was a great game up until this point. Lots of stuff where I could have gone more aggressive. I could have played, more, with more hazard, basically more risk. And yeah, that puts me at 3-0. Very, very nice start to the tournament. And yeah, I'm looking good for a good finish. Let's see if we can do it. All right, this is round 4. This is game 3, and I'm playing against a cool deck. My opponent's deck has Mishra's Workshop and Mana Drain in it, which is a blast from the past. The One Ring, Sauron's Relic, or whatever it's called, that actually casts the Mana Drain. Which is, I'm always excited to play. When I was a kid, Mana Drain was busted, so it definitely... There's definitely some good emotions flowing through my body when I'm playing against a deck like this. The same can be said about that opener, so we take a mulligan. And now we just have a decent 6, right? Let's see, my opponent plays a lot of mana out turn 1. What is this? Oh, Lauren Revealed, right. Okay, so my opponent cracks a Black Lotus to cast Lauren Revealed. That's a good play. It's an expensive Ancestral Recall, but it is +2 after all. I guess +1 after sacking the Lotus. So here, I believe I go turn 1 Duress to kind of see what's up. I have the misstep in case my opponent plays, nasty stuff like Spell Pierce, Ancestral Recall, Mystical Tutor, Empiric Tutor, stuff like that. Second Doomsday was a very bad draw. My opponent fetches red here, which makes me think that this misstep can maybe catch a Pyroblast later. Duress gets flustered. My opponent passes the turn. I have seen Mana Drain in the previous 2 games, so I kind of know what's going on here. Let's see if we can find a good draw. We didn't exactly find a good draw. So basically here, what you can do is you can either run just Dark Ritual Doomsday into what I believe is a pretty sure Mana Drain or Force Negation. Or you can cast the Brainstorm after tanking and make it look like you actually have your second land, but you're kind of making your opponent drain a bad card. My opponent does not take that bait, and my Brainstorm gets drained. Let's see what they can do with that 1 mana. Right now, my point about that Brainstorm was exchanging at least the Doomsday into a new card, building for Treasure Cruise, looking for the next land, but I got none of that. 1 mana from Drain. Also, by the way, in this matchup, I sideboarded out a couple of Street Wraiths. I sideboarded out Daze and Mystical Tutor. And I added... What did I add? I added Duress, Force Negation. There's a One Ring. Oh, Steel Sabotage. Right, that makes a ton of sense. Okay, there's a One Ring, which is very bad news for me because now I have to, I have to work fast. Otherwise, I'm just going to get buried in card advantage. My opponent draws a card right away. And I think now it's time to find an incredible draw here. Maybe something like Force of Will. I draw a Ritual. I'll go Ritual Doomsday. That's fine. I get drained once more, and yeah, things are looking bad here. I can miss the Ancestral after my opponent draws a couple of cards, but I do get Pyroblasted back, which is sadly what that red land did represent. My opponent with the Time Walk and the land that untaps the One Ring, so I throw in the towel here. My opponent would draw 7 extra cards on the next turn, and that puts me 3-1, and all of a sudden, I have to win some matches of Magic to get to the Promised Land. Okay, round 5. Everything is on the line here when it comes to tiebreakers. A win here makes sure that I don't really care about the result of the last round. So yeah, pretty important match. Let's see. We're up a game, and I've boarded out a Street Wraith, a Forced Negation, and a Mystical Tutor for 3 spot removal cards. Those being Double Cut Down and Fatal Push. I also believe I added the Duress in place of Necro. Okay, yeah. Necro on the draw against, decks that put, Deathrite, Tarmogoyf and stuff into play. Not the best. You can keep it, but it's not the best. This hand is looking fine. I can cantrip a lot, so this hand could be anything. Lotus is scary. Brainstorm less scary. I try and spike the misstep here by cycling in response. Also, I forgot to play around Hull Breacher and Bowmaster here, as I talked about in the last video. I remember it some of the time. Most of the time, maybe. But I guess they didn't have it, which is good for me. I draw land, which is not a good drop in particular, but it's a card I have to find eventually, so it's fine. My hand is looking to build towards Dig Through Time, it looks like. I can cast 2 Preordains turn 1. That's Preordain. There's Dark Ritual. So how do I interpret this? Am I willing to just go Dark Ritual, Doomsday, or am I waiting a turn? Let's see. Looks like I'm waiting a turn. I draw into the Force and I pass. Then I have the Dark Ritual next turn in case I want to get frisky. But I think this is actually a game where I find a good play. Okay, so here's an interesting line. My opponent plays Wasteland. I obviously played this out so I couldn't get wasted. I get to draw the Dark Ritual, and now what? I develop second fetch land. I count my graveyard. 1 card, 2 cards. Delta plus Misty, that's 4 cards. That would then put 3 mana in play. So now I'm cooking up a trap for the opponent, and I'm trying to how to say this? I'm trying to see if they take the bite and let me cast this Dig Through Time on this turn cycle when I was not supposed to. Let's see. How can we do that? We can do that by fetching an Underground Sea at a inconvenient time. The second Wasteland does not change that situation. It amplifies it a little bit, but it doesn't change it. So what I do here is on my opponent's main phase, I crack a fetch land. This is basically, I'm trying to look like I'm playing lazy here, and my opponent will try and punish me for it. So what I do here is I go for Underground Sea, then I try and go to my end step. Oh, my opponent's end step, rather. I'm allowed to do that. And now my opponent has priority again, and they go for the Wasteland. So what this does is I can float for blue, I can sacrifice the other fetch. That card hits the bin. And now I have 5 cards in the yard with 3 mana, so now I can cast Dig Through Time. My opponent makes the situation a little bit better for me here by wastelanding the second one. And what I realized is, if I find something like Ancestral Recall, it's better to hold up the Sapphire and eat my whole yard here. So I let this waste happen. Then I Dig Through Time with 6 cards in the yard, 1 mana up. I don't have the Fluster, but I could find Ancestral Recall. Let's see if my opponent likes this card. They don't. They negate it. I force it through. My opponent did not do anything. So this is a point where if my opponent had Fluster, they for sure go for it. If my opponent had Force of Will, they for sure go for it. So that's why I'm pretty confident in taking cards that just win the game on the spot. So I go Dark Ritual, Doomsday. I go for double Oracle, double Street Wraith, land pile. I Time Walk into Street Wraith. I believe I just Street Wraith twice and play Oracle and the game's over. Yeah, so this game was... I really like that play of giving my opponent the chance to play poorly, like timing-wise with the Wasteland. They're supposed to Wasteland on my turn, so I don't, gain mana with the Dig Through Time. But I end up casting the Dig Through Time on end step and winning on the spot. So, yeah, pretty tiny thing there, but still, like, it's cool to give your opponent that chance to mess up if it doesn't cost you anything. That's the main point. All those triggeries are good if they don't cost you anything, right? So yeah, that puts me at 4-1. The next round, I was able to play against an opponent who also didn't care about the outcome, so we shook hands and went to dinner. And next up, the top 8. Okay, quarterfinals time. I'm up against Green-White Hate Bears. Wezel is a player who's known for piloting such things. And it looks like I brought out Blusters, Negation, Necro, and I brought in Removal, basically. Yeah, that looks to be the case. Okay, so we're on a mulligan here, and I have to bottom a card. I believe I bottom Cantrip or Cut Down. I can't remember. I bottom Cantrip with the logic of maybe I have to kill 2 Thalias or 2 Archons over the course of this game. I cast Ancestral Recall. I don't find anything, crazy, but it's fine. My opponent goes Once Upon a Time into Thalia, sequence nicely with Pearl here, Cavern, Thalia. So now I kind of know what I have to do on my turn too, right? That card has to get killed, but I can develop Jet, take 2 damage from Watergrave. This is one of the times where Watergrave is miles better than Undercity Sewers. There are also examples of the opposite, where like fetching turn 2, turn 3 with unused mana, I would love the Surveil. So it's a work in progress, trying to figure out what's the best. My opponent has the Wasteland. I have to do it now, otherwise I lose my floated mana. So let's say my opponent has a second copy. It's just great play by my opponent there. Here's an Aspirant, which isn't like that card's not dangerous, so I actually feel pretty good here. It looks like I have Empiric Tutored for Lotus, and I can cast a Doomsday. So now setting up my deck, this is kind of where things get tricky. I put double Oracle, land, Lotus, but with the order of drawing Ancestral. Let's say I get wasted, then I need to draw land to cast that Ancestral and move on. Meanwhile, I have Force of Will with Preordain. So I go to 8 here. I get stripped, which is a disaster. My opponent can now attack me for 3. And my opponent's creature grows out of Aspirant range. Out of Cut Down range, rather. And my Force Will is now dead because I have to take 3 now and take 4 next time. So, terrible situation here. So this is where things get interesting, because my top card is Island. My next card is Lotus. What's the upside of having Island on top? What's the upside of having Lotus on top? There's something about anti-artifact cards like Oof. But there's also taxing cards like Thalia, like maybe that deck plays Thorn of Amethyst. I can't really think of much else. But it's going to be pretty clear here that sorry. I'm moving too fast here. I draw Ancestral now for the virtual time walk for the opponent. I have to pass the turn. My opponent with no play. So, but it's kind of the same point, because I had to, look into the crystal ball and try and see what was in my future. My opponent with no plays here. It looks like my opponent's on Archon, and simply only has 2 mana sources. And they looked at my exile, determining, okay, you only have 3 forces out here, so you must have a force in hand. So instead of playing Archon getting forced, I'm going to kill your land off. That's what I assume happened. Now I have to pass the turn and hope my opponent only plays a card like Spirit that I can cut down. Force Will is off the table because of how Luminar works. Yeah, this is ugly. This is pretty ugly. I have to really thread the needle here. But as fate would have it, my opponent plays Thalia here, which is unbeatable. can't counter it because of Cavern and my life total. And that means that my island on top of the deck taps me out for Ancestral, and I can't win. Funnily enough, if I was good enough of a player, I would have put Black Lotus here, because if everything goes to plan and I don't get stripped, I still Ancestral into the Black Lotus and the island. But if my opponent finds that second Thalia, Black Lotus here wins the game. Pay 1 mana for Black Lotus. Pay 2 mana for Ancestral. Find land Oracle. Play Oracle for the win. But yeah, the Thalia kills me here, as often as the case with Doomsday. Sometimes you just lose, of course, but it's oftentimes a situation where if you could have just seen that fringe scenario into the crystal ball, you would win. If I reverse those two, I win this game and I have a game 3 and I have a shot, right? So very, very tight margins, and just goes to show how powerful cards like, Cavern, Wasteland, Thalia can be. Like, unassuming cards, but very, very good, because vintage decks are designed to play from, low mana sources. And because you play so many cheap cards, Thalia makes Ancestral Recall 100% more expensive, right? Which is huge. So that's kind of just to put it in perspective with a little bit of math, that for 1-drops, it's 100% more expensive, which is a lot. So yeah, another good run here with Doomsday. I hope you enjoyed it. There was some interesting situations, some stuff that I learned about in the process, and hopefully you will as well, whether you're trying to take on the challenge of playing Doomsday or just want to be more well-equipped to beat it. I think especially looking at your opponent's exile here and just having some good ideas, like how many forces are in here, which restricted cards are missing, stuff like that, because then you can prioritize your agency better. Like, Black Lotus is missing, then maybe Lavinia and Oof are good cards when casting this Ponder or choosing between card A, card B to play out, right? So there's a lot of context to it, and I think both as a Doomsday player, if you kind of neglect that context, or as a Doomsday opponent and you kind of neglect that and just, I'd probably just die anyway, I might as well do whatever. Like, this is analyzing this pile and, of course, all the other cards in exile and how the game progressed, all of the small tells. That's what's going to put you over the hump, whether you're trying to beat Doomsday on a regular basis or try and finish well in tournaments. So yeah, I hope you guys like this video. I will be off to the Pro Tour very soon, so I'll probably have a break when it comes to uploading videos, but I'll come back stronger. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Yeah, I'll see you next time back on the channel. Bye, guys.